All right. Welcome everyone to the May 11th JupyterLab weekly call. There are 18 participants right now. Hopefully more people will be coming. If you haven't already, please take a look at the agenda, which is in the chat, and add your name to it if you wish, and add a bullet point if there is something you would like to discuss. If you have a longer thing than say roughly 5 minutes, then please add it to the discussion section at the bottom. And I will try to do a better job of actually keeping people to the 5-minute rule this time. But for now, let's get started. The first person on the agenda is Eric, who can't be here, but I'll read it. It just says he plans to cut a JupyterLab patch release 3.4.1 tomorrow to get some fixes in. So that's good. And the first person who is on the call today on the agenda is Frederic. So you're up.
Hey everyone, I try to not take as long as last week. So some announcements first. There's gonna be the performance meeting after this one if you are interested. So just stay connected. I'll be sharing my latest work on the virtual notebook because I'm back to that subject. If you want to join, feel free. The next announcement is a follow-up. So since a couple of weeks, we have discussed the opportunity of introducing a Ui Toolkit in JupyterLab. There's been a vote, and the vote on the Team Compass got accepted. So I'm gonna probably do some PR in the coming time, but nothing mandatory for 4.0. Like it can be definitely done afterwards. That's not priority for 4.0. And on the technical side, there's been some discussion, and I think the subject is coming back a couple of times about crypto error. So I'm not so familiar with that part of the dependency, but I'm gonna try to summarize things here, and if people have better knowledge or have comments, feel free to jump in the discussion. But in the package core utils of Lumino, we were depending on the Node.js crypto package. That was fine because Webpack was providing some alternative for us in the web browser, except that in recent version is not the case any longer. So on the Lumino side, there's been a PR that replaced that code. So basically the package has two versions. He has a version for Node that's using crypto, and he has a version for the browsers that's not using crypto. And that resulted in the 1.12.0 version for core utils. And I'm wondering if the error people are seeing downstream, because it's usually happening when they're trying to build some extension or some customized JupyterLab with pre-built extension, I think. I'm wondering if the reason for the error still showing up is because we are not constraining the version of core utils to be 1.12, but to be 1.11 in the 3.x versions. So the question I get is that should we bump and release it? Yeah, you're right, William. The alternative is definitely people can either customize the Webpack config, and I think Vidorf has tested also that's a possibility to do that directly in the package.json. I think you can also do some kind of fallback there. So yeah, that's the question. Like, should we advertise only that configuration, or
So
will bumping the dependency in the JupyterLab help downstream user not having that issue? Go ahead, Vitor, sorry.
yeah, no worries. I had a bit of a mixed experience trying to solve this for my package, and I didn't go to the full root of it. I basically made it work. I tried different things until something stuck and worked, and then didn't fully find the root cause. But for me, this was an IPyWidgets package, and I was compiling against, had a dependency on the phosphor version of the package, and relying on JupyterLab's resolutions for it to pick up the latest version. And when I had that and combined with all of these other Webpack 5 configs, it didn't really pick it up correctly. But if I just updated to having it to be Lumino version directly, it did work. So it's a data point. Don't read too much into it because it might just be a very weird special case. But yeah, there's potentially a lot of stuff that's going on. So yeah, I think this bus just list different kinds of way to solve it, and then hopefully everybody will find something that works for them. So either that or somebody have to actually dig down and figure out what is the root cause of this not being pulled in correctly.
Yeah, as I said, not really familiar with everything, especially because as soon as there are extensions involved, we start to be in uncontrolled, even a less controlled environment for node packaging resolution. So it can be very tough. So yeah, I'm fine to say let's advertise on the issue, and hopefully with time we won't see that too much in the future.
What do you think, Frederick, is the long-term solution to this? The upgrading the Lumino dependency?
I don't know. I mean, it makes sense, I think, to upgrade it. It's probably gonna help resolving the environment of downstream user. So I would say it's probably the right thing to do.
And so why don't we just do it? Because it's upgrading on a patch release.
Yeah, that's the other question then. Is it okay to upgrade it?
Lumino has been a pretty safe upgrade. There's very minimal changes, and we've upgraded.
It's what
before.
I think so, but I was thinking let's bring it to discussion just to be sure.
Like if there was a concern, we can patch our Webpack to do the browser module fix, which is what William's suggesting and other people on the issue are suggesting. But I wouldn't be opposed to upgrading the Lumino dependency.
Okay.
In fact, since the Lumino dependency is a carrot, all we have to do is really just bump it in the yarn lock, right?
Yeah.
It's not actually.
Yeah, definitely. We should just check in the yarn lock, but probably we should also in the package.json, like if people are building with a source extension, it's probably safer to do that.
So the core reason we need this crypto node library is because we want the get random values function only. Does there exist like a polyfill or something? Do we actually need the package node?
Yeah, there's a browserify polyfill, but the point is, I think the Lumino code tries using the crypto random number generator from the browsers, and it falls back to the crypto package, if I remember right.
Well, it tries to use the actual crypto library, though, is only for Node, right? It's not for browsers.
Right. There is a browser version of it, which is this crypto-browserify that's mentioned in the issue. So you can resolve to that to get the crypto library, Or you can just say, look, if we're running in the browser, all the modern browsers that we have these days support the crypto random number generator. So we shouldn't call it anyway. And that's why the crypto : false works as well, because Lumino, I think, never hits that fallback.
Well, it does in
browser.
Node, right?
In Node, it would. In the browser, it won't.
Right.
So
right.
when we're compiling for the browser, we're using Webpack, we can do crypto : false to say, look, just ignore this import because we'll never hit it and we know we won't ever hit it.
Oh, I see. Okay, cool. Right. Okay.
That's my hypothesis. I haven't dug into the issues here, but into the code here, but
Okay. Fred, does that give you enough to go on?
Yeah, then I will open the PR then and raising the minimal version. I mean, it's only from 1.11 to 1.12, and I think the difference on core utils is just that PR that changes the crypto support for splitting node and browser.
As far as I can see from the staging yarn log, it is already 1.12. So it may be that they're pulling in too old of a version of JupyterLab, right? If they're trying to build it with 3.2 or 3.1, maybe they have the old version locked in. Then we would have to do like a patch version of all of these other older versions, right?
But that's the weird thing, because the issue states it's Jupyter at 3.4. So, but I'm wondering if they are not using source extension or those extensions that may pin core utils at another version. That's that I don't know.
so core utils fixes this issue.
The latest
1.12.
Yeah.
So if, I guess, yeah, either they need to be able to make sure that they pick up the upgrade. Thanks, Vidar, for checking that. Or they need to include this workaround in the Webpack.
But yeah, that's fine. I will open the PR and then we can discuss there to decide if we merge it or not for bumping it.
Okay. Just a comment on your first point about the UI toolkit. So we left the vote open longer than I think required, but we had, at the moment the vote was open, there were 13 people on the JupyterLab Council. There are now 14, but we had 8 out of 13 people vote. They all voted yes, so it's not particularly controversial. No one voted abstain or anything, and so the vote passes. I think this is the first public vote that the JupyterLab Council has taken, so hopefully A, votes are kind of rare because we arrive at things by consensus, but B, next time we'll have some patterns for the tags and the labels in the Team Compass. If there's a label for vote and there's a label for when a vote ends, decision made, that comes out of the decision-making guide and the governance docs, and hopefully that makes it easier to follow issues if you care about specific decisions being made as opposed to other issues that are in the Team Compass. And yeah, so thanks for being the guinea pig. Cool. Okay, great. Carla, you are up next.
Hi. So it's just a small update for me. I have posted a PR that I submitted against the 3.4 branch to bump the version of a library called Marked. It was detected as vulnerable, so and it was used in RenderMine and sales packages. Yeah, thanks, Frederick, for getting me with the failing CI tests in there. I just have one small failure right now. I think it's like a Python 3.7 test. I'm not sure that's flaky test or what. So if somebody could just please take a look and let me know if there's anything else we need to address, that'd be great. And also if we're planning a patch release or minor for 3.4, like maybe that one can go in.
Awesome, thank you. I'm gonna rerun this job because it seems unlikely that that would be related to your change. So hopefully it'll pass. And if not, we'll take a look and try to figure out what's wrong with it. But yeah, thanks for fixing the vulnerability.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Kara, it should be probably just flaky. It seems that the registry from Yarn package just failed during the download of some packages, so should be fine.
I hope so. Okay, thanks. Yeah, that's all.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, Jason W., you're up.
Okay. I just had a quick question. I don't know whether Isabel is on the call. I tried to reach out to her directly via a DM on the discourse forum because I don't have her email address. Don't think she's on the call right now, but in any case, I'm curious about the May community call. Currently on the calendar, it's scheduled for May 31st at 8 a.m., which does not conflict with any other Jupyter meeting. Although it is the day after Memorial Day in the US, which means a lot of people, including myself, will be taking additional days off around that. So I'm curious about whether folks want to keep it there or move it around. What do folks think about that?
I defer to whoever is going to host it.
Or does anybody know Isabella's email address so I can follow up with her directly?
Yeah, I'll
I
send
see
it.
Tony said I can relay the question. Thank you, Tony.
Oh, okay,
So
cool.
I'll defer to Tony to continue this discussion. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Jason. And oh, do we have a double Jason in a row? Sweet. Jason Grau, you are up.
Thanks. Yeah, I've started using my GitHub handle just because it contains my last name and it's a link. That might be a pattern we could consider for these names in the agenda so that it is a little more descriptive. I went to PyCon last week and PyCon US, and there was a number of mentions of JupyterLab and interesting things that I thought people here would be interested in knowing. We had a JupyterLab tutorial by Mike Muller. I went and helped out. There was maybe around 80 attendees. It was packed. Like I had to sit on the floor for a little bit, that type of thing. And lots of good discussion and lots of good questions and a bug or two that came out of it, bug report or two that came out of it. The JupyterLab in the Expo Hall, you wander around and several products in the Expo Hall are just based on JupyterLab. You can see it's like Coiled.io, of course, uses JupyterLab, and there was another simulation framework that was totally based on JupyterLab. So we talked about coming to the JupyterLab meetings and being part of the community. It was a good conversation. One interesting announcement at the conference was the PyScript project. So many people here are aware of Pyodide, which is the compile Python to WASM and run it totally in your browser. It's the foundation of Jupyter Lite, which maybe some people here have worked on, and certainly a lot of people have seen. The underlying project for Jupyter Lite is the Pyodide project. And a different project that's being built on top of Pyodide is called PyScript. So PyScript is the big announcement from Peter Wang at the conference. Anaconda's been working on this and investing in it. It's essentially Python in the web browser plus DOM access. So it adds on top of Pyodide, which is just running Python in your web browser, DOM access, a little more polish around wrapping libraries and things like that from the Pyodide project. Try to just make it a little more polished and a little more accessible. When we were talking about what ramifications there are for Python in the web browser, which by the way is becoming, as I understand it, an official target for Python, CPython very soon. People are working on upstreaming basically the Pyodide packages, patches to core CPython. So CPython is supported as running in the browser under WASM. As I was talking to the Pyodide maintainers and others about like, what does it look like to have Python in the browser? You know, is this the year of Python in the browser? One thought that came to us was, wouldn't it be nice if we could write JupyterLab extensions in Python? Essentially, we are a number of JavaScript programmers, a lot of us, that are supporting millions of Python programmers, and 99.9% or 999% or something like that of the programmers that we have access to are Python programmers and don't want to learn JavaScript, and they do their lives in Python. Can we offer them the ability to customize their environment in Python? And so I started working on converting the plugin playground to run a Python, expose the JupyterLab API as Python objects and let you just write an extension in Python that connects to the various services in JupyterLab. I got just a few minutes into it and realized that the Pyodide project doesn't compile in Webpack and everything. And I spent the rest of the sprints working on Pyodide and working with the Pyodide folks. But I think this is a really interesting possibility. Write JupyterLab extensions in Python, and Pyodide makes it, I think, possible to do that and to experiment with it. So anyway, I don't have time to devote my full time to it right now, but this is a project that I'm interested in pursuing sort of in spare time. If anybody else is interested in looking at it, I'll open an issue in JupyterLab and we can discuss there, and maybe we can arrange a time to maybe sprint together on it or something. I guess the one other thing I'll mention, so Carol Willing was there, Steve Sylvester was there. So we had a Jupyter office hour that a few people came in, and in general, there were various other conversations at the conference about using Jupyter, using API widgets, using JupyterLab in their workflow. As opposed to the PyCon has typically been a very general conference. There were a ton of people there these days in data science, and there was talk about next time maybe having a whole data science track. So it might be a conference that you would like to put on your radar for next year. It's in Salt Lake in April. I was at Salt Lake City this year. It'll be in Salt Lake City next year. Anybody that comes, I'm happy to host a tailgate party at my house. I'm now local in Salt Lake. It'll be a lot of fun to see people there. But I think it'll be a good conference, like rising to the level of SciPy as far as importance, or PyData conferences, as far as like a collection of people that are interested in data science and Jupyter and using Jupyter in the Python world. So I think that's it.
Thanks, Jason. Piyush, you're up next.
Okay, so these are some questions that came up internally as they're upgrading from JL1 to JL3. The first one is around IPA kernel 6, and I didn't know how to answer that to them. Are there any known problems? Is it okay to ship JupyterLab 3 with IPA kernel 6 versus 5? Are there any known problems around that with JupyterLab 3? Does anyone know?
That's a weirdly open question, but the answer is no, it's fine.
Okay. The second one is around a customization. So the thing that they want to achieve is that when you have a remote kernel and you want to have a terminal open with a remote kernel, the current behavior in JL3 is that it'll just hang on for the WebSocket until the kernel is available. So that takes about a couple of minutes, and there's no terminal window available. In JL1, there was a way to customize that by overriding some of the functions so that you can create a dummy terminal without any name, and then update the connection once the connection was available. I'm just wondering if anybody else had tackled this problem in JupyterLab 3. Is it possible to have a better experience in JupyterLab 3? Yeah.
I think no one's
Darren, are you on mute?
Oh, sorry. I said, I don't know the answer to this. Does anyone else? So it wasn't a helpful thing that you didn't hear me say.
You mentioned you overrode private functions to try to get this working, etc. Maybe we would encourage you to look at starting a discussion around maybe is there something that we can make more public or make it so you don't have to go into the internals of JupyterLab to get this feature or
Sure.
contribute it upstream.
Yeah, I think I'll open an issue and add some more code details, and then I think we can discuss over there. Okay, great. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Piyush. Okay, I had a quick announcement. Next Tuesday in the hour before this hour, so 8 a.m. Pacific time, 4 p.m. UK time, is the second notebook V6 to V7 extension migration office hours. That's a mouthful, but the idea is if an extension author who wrote an extension for the classic notebook is interested in having some guidance or has some questions on how to make their extension work in notebook version 7 or JupyterLab using the new APIs, we are there to help. Last week, no, was it last week? Last time we held it, whether it was last week or not, it was last week. We actually ended up talking about an extension that wasn't a classic one, but it was a helpful conversation to have anyway. And this coming one, please come if you have an interest in any of those things, whether or not you're migrating an extension, because I guarantee I'll be there, but I may be there by myself. Yeah, Vidar.
So for those who have extensions which distribute both the classic NP extension and the JupyterLab extension, we won't have to do anything about the classic NP extension stuff, right? That there's no shims that will try to pick this up or anything like this by default. We can just leave that as is to retain support for version 6.
Correct.
So if we have both the classic and the lab extension will probably work if it integrates well with the UI, the lack of like specific zones in the areas.
That's right. So if you've already written a lab extension, you might want to give some thought to the user experience of what that lab extension feels like in notebook version 7, because as you say, it has a different application shell and different zones where your extension can reside. And but you shouldn't have to re-author much of your code, if any at all.
Right. So the people who are interested in that can also show up to this office hours.
Yeah.
Good.
Fred, you have your hand up.
Yes, about this issue, let's say, of ARIA. I'm looking at the PR I'm working on. Let me share. So let me zoom a bit. The animation won't be bigger, but the screencast is not fully accurate, but I've been working on a PR to be able to customize the positioning of panels or widgets from different factories in different area than what an extension is proposing by default. The idea is to use that features in the coming notebook v7, so that, for instance, if the extension you are implementing in JupyterLab shows up in a sidebar, but you want it to be on like the tree view, like the view in which you get the file browser in the notebook, it will be as simple as defining the settings for the notebook. And with the follow-up PR for notebook 7, I will also propose something to introduce some area for the left, right, and probably down panel too.
Cool. Jason?
I was just following up on Vidar's question because I know a lot of iPyWidgets maintainers will have this question about JupyterLab or Jupyter Notebook version 7. My understanding is iPyWidgets already worked in RetroLab, so picking up their JupyterLab extension. So it sounds like widget maintainers just don't have to do anything. It'll automatically work in Notebook 7 using a JupyterLab extension. Should that be generally true? Is they're not doing anything sort of complicated or?
Yes, I think it'll generally be true, but if it's the case that the underlying Lumino libraries need to be bumped because of iPyWidgets, they'll have to do that,
Yeah.
but they won't have to do any additional work that they wouldn't have to do to support JupyterLab, basically.
Cool.
And Jeremy has also implemented a solution for dealing with customized viewer. So that's just already available for Notebook V7. So, and that's pretty cool.
Okay, cool. So we don't have any other people in the agenda. We have some discussion items, but I'll give you a second if there's something you maybe wanted to talk about but didn't add to the agenda to chime in now before we jump into that. Okay. The first discussion bullet point says PyData London Sprint ? Who added that?
I added that, but I was hoping you would talk about it, Darian.
Sure.
I can give a brief overview, but you're probably more suited to talk about it.
Okay, cool. So PyData London is happening in the middle of June, and on the Saturday in the middle of it, the Saturday the 18th, we are going to have a sprint, a 2-hour sprint on JupyterLab issues, and Vidar and I are going to be hosting it. And I think the plan is that we'll do a tutorial that is similar to the office hours that Jupyter Server has been doing, the contributing hours, sorry, where basically we'll show people how to do a small pull request from scratch against JupyterLab. And then we will share a curated list of issues, so good first issues, help wanted, with the participants, and we will support them as they work on those issues. And the hope is that we get some new contributors from this event. If you come across an issue, whether you're coming to the triage calls or you are just seeing them come in and you think it's appropriate for a first contribution, please use the good first issue label that we have, because that's super helpful. We're often short of those. The event again is on the 18th of June. Let's see, what's the full PyData London date still? Let me look that up. So the full dates are 17th, 18th, and 19th. And this sprint is on the 18th, this Saturday in the afternoon. I don't think the schedule is on the site yet, but when it is, it'll be on there. I don't believe any portion of the sprint ends up recorded or on Zoom or anything. I think it's an in-person event and meant to be like this isn't a talk. This is just bringing in people who are interested in contributing to the project. And again, that is in London. It's near Tower Bridge. I forgot where exactly, but I think I checked the map. It's a kind of a scenic place. And London in June is nice, so you should come.
I think it's the Tower Hotel, if I remember right. We had a sprint at PyCon, and I helped a few people make their first contributions to Jupyter, and realized that we have a wide variety of quality of good first issues. So if you'd like to help either curate a good first issue or create a new good first issue, I think the best good first issues are ones where essentially most of, or even all of the debugging has been done for the person. And essentially it's, here's the problem. Here's kind of the background of what's going on behind this problem. Here's the lines of code that are relevant to this problem. And then like, if you really want to give them a helping hand, here's the change I would make, or here's kind of the idea of the change I would make, so that the good first issue, like they're already pretty overwhelmed often with, you know, cloning JupyterLab, getting a dev environment set up and everything. If the actual code change that they make is extremely simple, or even just told basically to them, and they can just make that change and then go through the process of submitting a PR, often the good first issues are more about helping them through the PR process rather than diving deep into the internals of JupyterLab and figuring out where 5 different connections live and everything. If we can do that work for the people, then they can concentrate on the process of becoming a contributor. And so if you want to curate a good first issue or open a good first issue, what I've seen be really helpful as a good first issue is do all that debugging work and give, like, just go out of your way to do almost everything except actually make the code change and write that all up in the issue, and then let them actually just make that code change and submit the issue. And that gives them enough confidence that they're going to go look for another issue that's a little more complicated, that they're going to have to dive into the code a little deeper, and that's a good second issue. So anyway, if you'd like to help out with creating for good first issues, that would be an excellent way to improve the quality of our good first issues.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Jason. Adam, what are you thinking?
Is there going to be anything like this on Zoom where we can learn how to do pull requests correctly and go through that process that Jason described?
So, Jason, do you know offhand, we've done a version of this enough times. Do you know offhand if we have any that are already recorded?
I don't know off the top of my head. I know we've done things like this, but we typically haven't been recording things a lot.
Yeah.
So
Right.
we should do another one. Excellent.
If we already have the recording functionality in Zoom, we could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we could. I just thought of something sort of fun. And like, okay, so next Tuesday's call, right? If it turns out that no one shows up for help migrating their extension from Classic to V7, it seems like a good use of that time might be to do a small pull request against JupyterLab, because it's the same skill set and might be beneficial. So that's one time we could do it. We could maybe, as part of the documentation blitz that comes out of JupyterLab for Notebook V7, make a short video that's similar, because the sort of content we're talking about, aside from, you know, bandwidth aside, it should really be kind of shorter than 10 minutes, really. So the idea is, you already have a GitHub account, let's say. you fork the repo, you pull down your clone to your local machine, you create a new branch in Git, you make your change, you commit it, you push it up, open a PR. Like it should be really fairly straightforward to do. So Yeah, I think that would be a nice resource to give people.
I just want to say what's I've always been confused about is how do you know where to put the PR to? Those are like questions I don't understand. There's so many branches there. Maybe it's just because I don't know how PRs work very well. Maybe that's the problem. But that's been my confusion. I'm afraid to do anything because it's a complex project. So it's one of the barriers I've had. So I think if I could see somebody do it from start to finish, then I wouldn't be afraid to do it.
Saul
So-
played around with the idea of Twitch streaming JupyterLab development and just, you know, the debugging. This is a little bit maybe above the level of what you're thinking of, just start to end. Here's how to submit a PR, which I think we should have as well. But if anybody's willing to record themselves just diving in and figuring out a JupyterLab issue, that's also helpful.
Yeah,
they
just
may-
an example issue or example maybe just something very simple, you know, and then once that is done, then I think anyone could extrapolate on that, because then it becomes a programming issue and not a how to work in this environment issue. You know, how to, you know, all those code testing things you got to run your code through when you do a PR, those things can be confusing actually. Sometimes the debugging of those things can be confusing. So those things, a walk through all of that would be great. So when is this? I'm sorry, Vidar, for interrupting you, but when is this next demonstration of this?
Oh, that was just me trying to figure out what to do next week in case nobody comes for the office hours for Notebook V6 to 7 extension migration. But if it turns out that is not an appropriate time, I think I'll give it some thought, and we can schedule a time to do it, because it seems like if we record this, it'll be beneficial. And
I don't want to miss it. How can I be sure I don't miss this event? You know?
There is no event yet, so I promise I'll get in touch with you if there is one. How's that?
Yeah, thanks, Darian. I appreciate that.
Sure thing.
For posterity, it might also be useful to think whether video is the best thing, because we've had a bunch of video efforts previously where, you know, videos are moved around, they're not really added, they get outdated very quickly, nobody's checking them for accuracy and nobody's really updating them. So if you have written documentation, there is at least a much lower threshold for fixing docs. Once they become out of date, they will be scrappable, these kind of things. So it, like for the moment we moved from the master branch to the main branch, whatever instructions you have for which branch to target will be outdated, right? So it's those hopefully won't happen too much, but we constantly change stuff about which tests we run and how things fails and what you should run locally, right? So it's it might be worth having it you've written instead of a video, but a video might be a good place to start from for somebody to make a written instruction.
Yeah, maybe a blog post that has the text in it and a screencast, and the blog post has the quality of being a moment in time. It falls into a timeline. So if you're looking at a blog post from 2 years ago and it says, hey, this targets, you know, JupyterLab 4.x before it's been released, and this was the process then, at the very least, you won't have the impression that this is the official sanctioned current way necessarily. But yeah, that's a good point. I don't really have a good answer to this. What other discussion items do we have though? SciPy, what's new in JupyterLab proposal accepted as a poster with the possibility of a backup talk? Who wrote that? And
I think I wrote the next 2 items. So just FYI, we've been accepted. Martha and Alex and myself, I think, were the ones that submitted the talk. It was accepted as a poster. but it's given a backup slot, which means we may or may not be able to actually talk there. But anyway, SciPy, just put it on people's radar. Again, another conference, middle of July, SciPy in Austin would be a fun place to see people.
Yeah. As a reminder, we also have a tutorial at that conference that was a backup and did get accepted. So there is precedence for backup to get accepted at that conference.
And the IPyWidgets tutorial got accepted as well. So there will be plenty of Jupyter things at the conference, as always. And then just FYI, some people in this crowd might be interested. William's giving a talk on IPyWidgets in CoCalc at our IPyWidgets dev meeting, 10 a.m. Pacific next Tuesday. If you're interested, William gave a short agenda here.
Yeah, just come for the 8 a.m. call and just stay until 11.
There you go.
Cool. This markdown parser test business that's in here, is this a discussion item? Fred, I take it this is you, right?
Yeah, it's
Cool.
the follow-up of 3 weeks ago now, I think. It depends. We can definitely talk here about it. I place it there, but if somebody has other subjects more pressing, feel free.
Hey, we made it to the bottom of the list. Go for it.
Let me take the right thing under my eyes. Okay, so to give a bit more feedback, so on the benchmark repository, I have set up some automatic tests for generating the HTML DOM from common markdown tests using JupyterLab renderer. Some weeks ago, we discussed about that, and the idea was trying to figure out what are the source of the discrepancy, if they are desired, or if there is something we need to fix. So that's what I'm trying to report here. There is three discrepancies that are expected, let's say, or wanted. In JupyterLab, every time we are converting a heading, we are adding it some ID that's computed automatically from the text of the title. And we are also creating a link for it. So that's something, of course, it's not done by command mark. The other thing that we are doing that I didn't know, actually, it's because we are using code mirror for highlighting syntax in code block, we are having some additional elements. I don't think I've printed or did I? Yeah, in the table below that this desired discrepancy, the second test, the 10112. So when there is a language, here it's Ruby, you would get, if you go on the right, you would get like a class that say we are using common code mirror Jupyter special team for Ruby. So we are getting much more dumb note that what command mark is doing by default, because it's just like using a code block. So those are expected. And the other one that's expected is we are using a sanitizer by default. So some stuff get converted or suppressed in JupyterLab. Like the main example here is there is a test with a script tag, and so the script tag is removed for us. And there are some styling also that got removed by time to time. So that I presume is fine. And also, I think a consequence of the sanitization is in the test, there are a couple of tests that are, and it's like in the second part below the first table, like the two fixed discrepancies. There are a couple of tests that result officially in unbalanced HTML block, and in JupyterLab that get fixed somehow, and I think it's the sanitization step that's converting or closing some div that are partially open. So I'm not sure it's something to be fixed. I think it's expected, but I'm not sure. That's why I say to be confirmed. And the other thing that's definitely a discrepancy is the way some tabulation characters or new line characters are transformed. So there's those two examples, the 1 and the 120, in which we are not converting the same way some tabulation. Basically, it seems that every tabulation are removed when you are rendering the markdown. So yeah, that's what's come out of it. I also realized that so we are using the JavaScript Mark.js library that we discussed a bit earlier for converting Markdown syntax, and in their CI they are also running against those tests of command mark. It's just like they are not covering all of it, but they basically are covering quite lots of it. Like I think like 95% of the tests are passing directly by Mark.js. So that's kind of a good news on that front. So the question now is what to do. And so I just focused really on command mark. I know that I've read also, I looked at nbconvert because it's basically also one of the big tools in Jupyter ecosystem that is important to align for rendering Markdown. And they're using a Python library that's called Mistune that by design decided to not be compliant to all tricky case of command mark, and it's written like on the front page. we decided that there were some of those tests that are like normal people writing Markdown won't try to use those kind of syntax. So we decided it was simplifying the parser. So we decided to drop it to have something efficient in terms of fast to parse. So I think it would be tough to keep that library on nbconvert, but that's another discussion to have probably.
Given this background and the results you've got, what is your recommendation for what we do?
That's a good question. The main trouble I'm seeing is if we want to have alignment, especially between nbconvert and JupyterLab, so that means you are talking about tools in different language. Keeping Mark.js may be tough to align with some parser on the Python side, for what I understood, because Mark.js is leaking extension like plugin system. So that's maybe the next question, like what could be a good candidate. Like lots of people have heard of Markdown 8, of course, but I know that some people have trouble with it in the sense that if I got it correctly, it's sometimes tough to have feedbacks from the maintainer. And other than that, I don't have neither lots of experience with Markdown parser. I know that there are lots of them in JavaScript and probably on Python side too. So I don't have like a preference or something to say, yeah, this one looks very much better than another one. I think if I'm not saying stupid things, William, you are using Markdown 8 in Cocada.
Yeah, and I really like it for what it's worth. It's cool that there's a Python implementation of it that TF pointed out. I didn't know that. And it looks like it's still actively maintained by the maintainer. Like there's new commits. My other comment in here is the thing I'm most interested in addition to the cool stuff you've done that you just showed us, is precisely when Jupyter recognizes something as being math jacks and should be processed by math jacks, and when it doesn't, like just a list of those. You know, when exactly does it decide, hey, this should be interpreted as math? You know, which dollar signs count, which begin end environments count, what shifts it over to math?
So by when, you don't mean chronologically, but you mean what conditions?
Examples. Yeah, what conditions? I mean, there's some code. I know the code well in Jupyter Classic, which is a bunch of regular expressions. I don't know if you just copied the same code in JupyterLab or
We
wrote
had
new
to.
code, or
because we tried to do it other ways, but in the end we were like, there's subtle issues. Let's just copy the regexes from the notebook. I think that's what we ended up doing in the end.
Just to interrupt for a second, I'm going to stop the recording right now.